Imagine this. You're sitting quietly in a room with your eyes closed. All you can hear is the air conditioning, the cars, and the sirens, especially if you live in New York City. But as you listen more closely, you start to notice other sounds. Maybe you hear the ticking of a clock or the chirping of a bird outside. Or maybe you hear the sound of your own breath. It is interesting because we are more in control than we think. Hello, and welcome to another episode of No More Distractions podcast. Sound is all around us, but we often don't pay attention to it. What if sound could do more than just entertain our ears? What if it could also heal us? Today, we're diving into the world of sound meditation with our guest, George, who will share his insights on the potential healing power of sound. George is an intuitive sound practitioner based in Brooklyn, New York. He's experienced firsthand the impact of sound and vibration as a modality that can lead to heightened awareness, inner exploration, and outer connectedness. That's why he offers sound meditations across New York for one-on-one or group experiences via the name Sound of Times. Are you ready to learn more about sound and sound meditation? Let's dive in. Hi, George. Welcome to our studio.
Hello.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very honored to have you and talk about sound and really if sound can heal us.
Yeah.
So
let's dig in.
I took one of your sound meditations and it was amazing. But I know you literally travel all over New York to offer that gift to so many people. So how long have you been doing it for?
Around 3 years now. Yeah.
3
so
years.
It definitely felt like a bit of a COVID situation of having some time to train in a new modality and really have that spaciousness to deepen like my own inquiry into sound, work with some fantastic practitioners who available to train because of the space that existed in between a lot of studios closing down and people not really having their regular work to do. So that's how it all turned around.
Wow. So did you ever try sound meditation before these 3 years? Like you were actually attending?
Yeah. And I give a lot of thanks to that, actually. There was a place called Womb Center on the Bowery in New York City. And that was run by a man called David Shemesh and his then partner, Ali Yan. And I got to experience their sound meditation, which were like 3.5 hour experiences, so a little bit longer than the ones that you came to of mine. And so this was 2019, and it changed my perspective of what sound could be, of what meditation could be, and what it meant to bring people into a space. Typically when you have spaces like that, they're about movement, they're about fitness. And yet to be able to be gathered in a space and just lie down and listen to sound with a few other things in the periphery, breath work, vocal toning, the whole kit and caboodle of what we now refer to as a sound meditation, was a beautiful experience for me, and I owe a lot to this man, David Shamesh, who then went on to become my teacher.
Yeah. So you usually teach groups, right? Do you ever do like private sound meditations?
Yeah.
And do you feel a difference in like the impact that it could have to someone? Do you think they could benefit better from like the energy in the room when there's a bigger group?
Definitely. And I kind of want to hear about what you felt about your experience when you came, and we'll probably get to that, but there is a purpose and a need for some people to be introduced to sound as a modality as an individual. They might feel nervous around people. Certainly, as a post-COVID situation, some people just don't want to be in groups, still don't want to be in groups. And that is a whole lot of healing itself. So we can see some of these spaces as being vital to be able to actually create a community that bring people together and steer away from that sense of the individual for whatever fear that may bring up. And I practice individual sound meditations for people. Sometimes I do them at home if I've got time, if I've got space. I used to do them a lot more in where I previously lived, somewhere else in Brooklyn. But my love for this work definitely comes from group experiences, because, as you say, what people can benefit from the collective is really powerful. When we talk about the idea of healing, I'm totally convinced that it is the community part of it that opens a conduit towards healing. People experiencing something beyond themselves, beyond the individual. And there's a wonderful term that now I forget who said it, but I remembered 5 minutes ago around this sense of collective effervescence that is really one of the 5 pillars of what one might refer to as awe. How people come into a place of expansiveness, spaciousness, and a deep listening and a deep level of harmony, that they experience something together that brings them outside of themselves. And so the group part of this, for me, opens up a whole new way of experiencing themselves, experiencing sound, and experiencing something that is, at the very base level, space from their thoughts, space from the outside world, space from the over-connectedness to our phones, and a deeper level of connectedness to each other and themselves.
Yeah, it's like a great dedicated time for everybody to come in and like focus on themselves. And I'm sure everybody comes in with like different intention and from a different background. There's different things going on. So I know that in the end of your practice, you ask everybody like, how do you feel, right? Like, how was that for you? And everybody has such a different experience. It's like such a unique journey. So like, how is that for you to hear that? And like, I don't know, have you ever had like a crazy experience of like hear something you've never heard before?
It took me a long time to be able to, as a practitioner and facilitator, work out the right way to get people, not get people, but to create the right space that people did share something, as opposed to sitting there silently and wondering what time it is and can I go now, and I don't really want to have to say anything. How do you prompt someone to be able to put into words something that perhaps is in that moment still quite inarticulatable? Don't even think that's a word.
But it makes sense.
Makes sense. Let's go with it. And it was only through sitting in ceremony myself with some people who really, really understood the field of healing with plant medicine, who come from a very long lineage of experiences that helped people understand what it was that they thought they were healing in the first place, where I sat and understood that part of it was the invitation to just softly inquire within what their body was feeling, rather than what the mind was telling them to think, oh, I have to say the best possible way of conveying my experience. How do you feel in this moment? What is your heart telling you to say? What are you able to now listen to? Now you're not just thinking with your head, but you're feeling with your whole being. And And to your point around everyone having very different things to say, if a proof of concept was needed for what this practice was, or a way of explaining this is not a synthetic relationship that everyone takes a pill and everyone feels the same, because everyone comes in with a different energy, has all come from different backgrounds, as you say, and the sound is going to resonate differently for each person based on their experiences, based on their memories, based on what they may perceive as trauma. Each thing, each instrument we play, each sound that we create is going to impact someone in their own way. And so therefore, when invited to be able to share, sometimes someone just wants to say, I feel good right now. Some people may have gone a little deeper. Of course, depends how many times people have been to a sound meditation, how experienced they are in sitting with themselves and sitting with sound. But that place of vulnerability, that openness and that willingness to share their experience can, I believe, when people are invited to explain a part of their experience, open up and say the words that their body is feeling, that itself is medicine. That way of being able to articulate their experience, that perhaps that person doesn't really like talking in public very much, but through the power of community, hearing each other, each person emboldening the other, not about forcing someone to have to say a word just because someone else did, but feeling comfortable and feeling that they are part of the gathering. That's some of the medicine.
And I think it's like eye-opening in a way, because you realize how different everybody is and how everybody's struggling with something different, and that it's okay, that like it's a no judgment zone, and you just like express, you, like you said, you open the pathway to just have people share whatever is in their mind. But I want to take a step back for a second, because I realize that some people might have never taken a sound meditation before. So if somebody right now is listening, how would you explain a class of yours, right? What kind of instruments do you use, or what is like the one that you use the most? What is the minimum or maximum amount of people that you think should attend a sound meditation? And let me think, what else should I ask? And what props do you think they should be used during a sound meditation?
Good point. So for group meditations, I mean, last night, for instance, I had one, and only 3 people turned up. And sometimes I get these really I wouldn't even frame it as a low turnout. I'm like, these are the people who are supposed to be here this evening. And then sometimes I'll have a larger group meditation and there'll be 45 people in the room. And for me, that's always very interesting, because one creates a very, very intimate relationship with sound, and the other requires perhaps more movement from me and the instruments through the room to ensure that there is a sense of real felt vibration with various different instruments. And all are good. For me, it doesn't necessarily make sense to say what's the smallest or largest amount of people who should go to a sound meditation, because it really depends on the person. Are they someone who wants to really feel into this quite energetic space with 45 people all having their own experiences, or would someone rather just be in a softer, smaller environment?
But would you be able to do a sound meditation with 100 people, 200 people?
I think I might need your partner to help me do something with the sound, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of like how you amplify something in that space without making it into a more recorded or digital experience, which other people are masters at, but I've yet to really feel into. And I definitely feel that for me, a part of the magic, we'll get to that part, I suppose, later. Part of the magic of the experience is for someone to really feel vibration, as opposed to just hear with their ears, but to listen with their whole body. And if that becomes complicated because of the size of the space and the amount of people who are also absorbing vibration, then it becomes questionable whether or not it's a purposeful live sound meditation versus something else that is just booming sound at people. I mean, yeah.
And how about the instruments you use?
So there's, in the way that I've been taught and trained, there is to some extent a protocol as to how to invite people into this place of awareness of sound and vibration, and that requires a couple of instruments that are almost fundamental to the experience. And I can talk you through them if you like. I mean, you'll remember some of them, I think, perhaps from when we began. It always begins with a little bit of breath work, and depending on the time that we have or the amount of people, that will be lesser or more intensive. And then we'll move into some vocal toning, which is, our own unique instrument, the power of our own voice, and guided with a shruti box, which is a beautiful harmonium-like instrument that we probably used when when you were there. And then we sort of gradually build up through intricate, more entrancing, I suppose, sounds like a koshi chime, which is this tiny little chime. When I first heard it, when I first went to a sound meditation back in 2019, I was convinced there were fairies in a box. I could not work out how something so delicate yet beautiful was being created. And obviously you have your eye mask on the whole time, so it was only like maybe 6 months later when I finally got to see what this thing was. And I was like, do you have that thing with the fairies in? My teacher was like, you mean this bamboo cylinder that has 12 silver rods in it? And that's what creates this tiny little sound that really invites the listener and the ears to be curious to the sound that we're building. And from there, a greater and greater degree of sound. So, for instance, we might move on to a 9-bar swing chime where we can move sound around the room to a certain degree. I'll use my Himalayan singing bowls, a symphonic gong, 32 inches, always fills the room with sound and vibration, and then instruments that are perhaps more organic sounding. And as we close out the meditation, always bringing it to something that feels and sounds a little more natural. There is no greater instrument than the power of our own voice and the power of silence. And so it's important to always clarify that where we're using sound as a tool for deep listening, that itself is an invitation into silence. And so if we use this whole hour or 90 minutes or 2 hours just to play instruments, just to play something that someone may end up considering as music, I don't think we're doing it right. It should always be an invitation to be able to, at least for a few moments, enjoy the glimpses of both silence, as in the sound that we hear, and silence, as in the inner stillness. For people to be able to perceive themselves and feel themselves free of thought for just a moment, with complete stillness, to really sit in stillness and silence and feel into what that means for them, can be quite confronting. Sometimes those moments of contemplation that people do share at the end of their experience, that's where they arise. These sudden moments in which your body is speaking to you because that's the only thing you can hear, the only thing you can feel.
Yeah. For me, the best part is when you come closer to like the group and you go like individually, and when like it's closer to me, it just feels like I'm getting showered with sound. I don't know if that makes sense, because it's like the vibration like more intense because it's closer to you, and it just feels like it's trickling from like the top down.
Yeah.
It's that magic you're talking about.
It is a little bit of magic, and truthfully, we are around that shower of sound all the time, but we rarely still ourselves enough to be able to feel it. And sometimes that's an invitation from me. I probably use my voice a little bit too much in meditations, and it really is a guided meditation. So there is that place in which I'm guiding the recipients to explore sound as fully as possible. And sometimes we have to be not told or instructed, but softly invited to be able to experience sound differently. And for me, that sometimes is helping to articulate through a visualization where that sound wave is moving as it is moving from the instrument, which I refer to as source, toward each person, and to perhaps help them construct in their mind's eye an understanding of what a sound wave even is. Like, I go into quite complicated way of explaining it, but somehow I've managed to make it work, and it flows as to this spiraling, oscillating source, I suppose, that's moving outward from the instrument to our bodies. And that helps to somehow, I think, convey a sense of sound moving, genuinely moving, not just towards us, but deepening its relationship to us. And it becomes about a conversation, a relationship between you as the recipient and the sound you're experiencing. And there's some wonderful instruments, a sound wave that I use and the 9-bar swing chime, which really bring sound so deeply close toward you, toward the person who's receiving, that we're no longer really listening to sound, we're feeling vibration.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful opportunity to explore something that is both scientific and spiritual.
Yeah, so true. And then part of your meditation, right, you also, I think, pay a lot of attention to the props you set up, right?
Yes.
Every mat has its blanket, you have the eye mask.
Yeah, so, right, you're right. Again, it took me a little while, I think, to get it down to what were the basics that should always be there, and thankfully I work with some beautiful studios that have just incredible props anyway. But I will always try to lay them, if it's one or two of the studios that need someone to do this, I will always try and lay them out first, and I realize that I'm actually quite specific and I need it to be as symmetrical as possible, and always like there to be a shape by which people can really just come in and they don't have to do anything. They're not scrabbling around for props themselves, and if they need extras, then they know where to find them. But it's a mat, it's a blanket on top of a mat, it's a folded blanket at the top of the mat so that people can rest their head on it. If the studio has bolsters, to have a bolster available to put critically, that place under and behind our knees where actually we kind of need support when we're lying down. To ask someone to lie down for an hour or 90 minutes or longer is a bit of a push. Like, even I sometimes will remind myself to go to someone else's sound meditation to remember what it's like to have to lie down for that long and how much pressure that puts on your lower back. And it's a reminder to me to always be exploring how other people create these spaces, because one of the key parts of this experience for me, and how I talk about it and what I've been trained to do, to facilitate, is to allow our bodies the deepest possibility of physically relaxing, yet to allow ourselves and our mind to keep focused. We don't want someone to go to sleep for 90 minutes, but if they really need to, then they're there for that reason, and they should, as long as they don't snore, it's good. Definitely been some tapping on shoulders every so often. But we as the facilitators, the space holders, also have a responsibility to be a part of that. So we always want to guide someone to be able to be in this place of stillness and softness, and not be distracted by our body, which is suddenly aching in all these weird places. Because if we can do something about creating a level of comfort, then that's going to be one of the main ways to get people to actually drop into their experience, as opposed to being distracted by their body, which is also working in cahoots with its mind, thinking, oh no, they're about to actually have some time to themselves and stop thinking about all of the lists and all of the things to do. What are we going to do to prevent them from deepening their experience? I know I'll tell them that their leg's aching or that their back needs scratching. All of these things which take people away from this present moment, which is so powerful. And I've seen people squirm for 90 minutes And I've also seen people who are able to just lie for 92 hours, 2.5 hours, and experience sound because they know it's going to have something impactful for them in there if they just let themselves soften and relax.
Yeah.
And that's such an important and big part of what this experience is. It's helping to regulate our nervous system in a way that people feel safe and secure and able to be vulnerable and not be so tethered to all of these things which are constantly stimulating them in the outside world. A big part of sound meditation, which we'll probably get to, is how we actually invoke that part of ourselves, which is about the self-regulation as opposed to the self-soothing. A lot to do with the hum, which I know you experienced when you came in.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's beautiful, and I think that for some people it's really hard to say, okay, I'm gonna set aside an hour and a half, whatever it is, to completely sit still. Considering that during the day a lot of people have desk office jobs, right? So they sit for 8 hours straight. And I'm sure they crave the movement. And I think that's why a lot of people are just rushing to get to the gym class or something that is intense. I think it's also part of society. It kind of tells you that like you really have to move like super hard for an hour and get crazy without nourishing other parts that need that nourishing, right?
Yeah.
So have you had moments, especially in the beginning when you started sharing this gift, where like people would not really see or, you know, devote the time? Because I feel like it must be hard.
Yeah, I think it is really hard, and I think as society, particularly, I mean, we live in New York City, so that's a very big part of this that perhaps wouldn't be the case somewhere else, but that's probably debatable. We've been conditioned to believe in everything being about physical perfection, physical success, and this idea of success as a metric, and we can, you know, use our Apple Watch to be able to tell us how many. I mean, I do it myself, and like where did my heart rate go when I was climbing, and what about the dog walk, and suddenly I'm monitoring everything for no reason. So the invitation is really something that I often will frame as this is a gift back to yourself. This is a gift of exploring what this experience can be like when we're no longer tethered to, and I will actually say it in these words, when we step outside the seconds and minutes and hours of our days, away from the mechanics of a ticking clock. And I came across this wonderful Greek term,
Oh, look at that.
Kairos time, a while ago. I can't even remember when it was that I would have read this or listened to it, but this beautiful way of experiencing the fullness of a moment without it being about the time spent doing it, just that was an experience itself. And the actual translation of Kairos probably doesn't mean that so much. For me, how to be able to help people from the moment they come in the door to really soften into the experience, to put their phones away, to stop feeling like this is a place where success has to happen. We have to be the most skilled meditator. Well, how about just surrendering to the moment itself and seeing what emerges, seeing what comes up? And I've been talking often with guests of late who every so often someone will say, I just felt like time evaporated, or I didn't even really know where I was. And it gives us these glimpses into what I think is some of the ancient technology known about sound for a very, very long time that we're only just reawakening and reconnecting to. If we look at it and feel it in a certain way, sound and vibration does take us away from this very man-made construct of time, because we're not measuring it in seconds and minutes and hours.
Right.
We're measuring it as a felt vibration. Our body is absorbing it as a felt vibration that is not really about time itself. It actually separates us from time. And so when we talk about giving ourselves this gift back of time, because we're no longer tethered to it. Our body's just experiencing itself in this beautiful sea and ocean of consciousness. And we don't have to think about all of the things that we normally would before we arrived and what we have to do afterwards.
Yeah.
We're just here experiencing ourselves.
I mean, time is relative, right?
Time is relative.
It really allows you to experience that.
Yeah.
Is that how you came up with Sound of Time?
Someone else asked me this the other day, and I cannot remember where it came from.
George is such a gift, right? He has a kind soul and such a unique way of connecting and expressing his experience with sound. There is a lot to unpack about sound, and we have to keep an open mind while we're exploring this topic. Can sound actually heal us? What does it mean to vibe with someone? What does it mean being in harmony with someone? Is sound the ultimate solution of healing, or is it just a tool? Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview that gets published in 2 weeks to find out. To learn more about Namaste City and this podcast, please visit namastecitylife.com and feel free to drop us a message by visiting the Contact Us page. You can follow Namaste City on Instagram or Facebook. If you have not already done so, please go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Thanks for listening to No More Distractions by Namaste City, hosted by me, Sonia. Today's episode guest was George MacPherson. You can connect with him through his Instagram page at sound_of_the_times.